You got a review.
Yeah.
You have a review there. I'll set this up for you. So Sage is going to do a review for Alone in the Dark, this video game here. And Sage, take it away, man.
So this was released in February of 2024, so it's pretty recent. Now, this was also for June, one of the free games on the PlayStation Plus service. That's how I played it. So if you're subscribed to PlayStation Plus and you are interested in this at all, you can go check it out. Still for free right now. Grab it while it's available. Um, and now I will say it's a great price free for this. Uh, because right off the bat, you get this little intro sequence here, and it's David Harbour and Jodie Comer, who is in 28 years later, which is they have this conversation in the car. It's very kind of like textbook exposition conversation, and this is something that echoes throughout the whole game. But there is this kind of very stilted, kind of awkward sense to the dialogue right away, and it permeates throughout the whole thing. And even David Harbour and Jodie Comer just feel like they're recording these lines so separately, and it feels like there's just a lack of direction being given to them. And there's some of the better voice actors in this too, because it ranges from that to cartoonishly over the top and just absolutely ridiculous at other times, which maybe is even a little bit more entertaining. Um, Now this is, a reboot effectively of a pretty old game. Alone in the Dark, which I believe is either 1992 or 1993. This original game predated Resident Evil. It did the fixed camera angle, survival horror, resource management, puzzle solving style of game. It actually did that first. Oh, there's another game called Sweet Home that was like 2D pixel art sort of thing. But this was like the first thing to really do it in that 3D space. Of course, Resident Evil is the more famous one. It did it better, bigger. Um, but this game has tried to kind of reinvent itself or bring itself back a bunch of times over the years. You had one on the PlayStation 1 after Resident Evil and Silent Hill. You had one on the PlayStation 3 that is like its own whole can of worms to get into. Um, like 2007, that was going for this very campy, very kind of different other style of thing. And this is, you get the sense that this one is really trying to kind of piggyback off of the resurgence of Resident Evil, the kind of third person over the shoulder style of like the Resident Evil 2 remake, which I guarantee is probably the biggest influence over this. Um, and I'll tell you in what way that is somewhat successful is environment design. This game looks really great when you're just looking at the atmosphere of the locale. Taking place in the early 1900s, you're going to a manor, and that's like a plantation manor in Louisiana. And it's definitely trying to do this kind of Lovecraftian cosmic horror sort of thing. Um, Beautiful environments. It really nails the time period, the aesthetics of the like kind of old rotten house, some of the kind of weird transitions between these otherworldly environments. That stuff's actually works really well. But the problem, I guess, in the dialogue and some of the kind of not very good voice acting is a big part of this. The problem is this game is not scary even one time. It is so expected, if that makes sense. Like the way the game works is you traverse this manor, right? Very Resident Evil 1. It's this big single house. You solve puzzles and you move around, and then you'll something will happen where it'll kind of pull you into like an otherworldly place for like a temporary amount of time. And there's only combat in those sections. So for the majority of the game, you can run around and basically just be absolutely certain that you're not going to run into an enemy or deal with any sort of real actual horror problem. And so you there's like this there's a complete just sense of safety that the game gives you that I think is totally counterintuitive to the genre it's supposed to be. And it just ends up feeling like there's not really that much happening outside of some puzzle solving. And then when you do go into these otherworldly sections, again, I think they look really cool. The environments are great. The kind of lighting is really great. Um, but then two things come up as a big problem there. Really weak enemy variety. Like there is maybe four different types of enemies in the entire game, and two of them were only in like one level each and then not used again. But most of the combat sections, there's just the two different types of things coming at you, and they just one just is like kind of weird skeleton, and one another one's like weird skeleton with like a blob on it. It's very uninspired design. And then the other half of that is the actual combat just does not feel that good. It's very clunky. It's very simple, and not that simple is bad because I'd say Resident Evil is fairly simple as well, but the there's a fluidness to the way it feels to shoot the gun, to the reload speed, to the how quickly you can turn your character to point at the next thing. And none of these none of them just really ever feel like they're coming together. It feels like there's a lot of like stuttering in everything. Um, and sometimes that's you saw right there with that door, the door like opened and then shut again two times in a row. It
Oh,
just
actually,
feels
let me look at it again. I didn't actually catch
it was like the last like 3 seconds of that right there. Did you see that like
Oh,
flash
yeah.
that happened there?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, there's just a lot of stuff like that. I mean, I didn't have like game breaking glitches, but there were lots of little things like that where I just feel like it didn't have the resources to polish itself fully in the way that I'm sure they probably wanted to. Um, but I think the budget just wasn't that big on this. So, I don't want to be too harsh on it because it's not like a huge AAA budget or anything like that. They had to work with something smaller. But is that, you know, I think that's not an excuse for what sometimes just feels like bad game design. And here's the cherry on top of that part of it. Uh, in the last like level or two of this, they commit to me what I think is like a cardinal sin for a third person survival horror game. Now, in all of these types of things, Resident Evil, Dead Space, Alan Wake 2, was really good about this. As you play the game, you open up the environment, you get access to more of it, you create shortcuts, you make it easier to traverse. That is one of the fundamental, like, satisfying aspects of this style of game. And in the last, like, actually, I'd say the last like two or three areas of this, the game takes it's the same environment in this manner you've been traversing the entire game, but the game all of a sudden locks everything that you've opened, and you have to like refine keys to get some of the stuff that you've already gone through all this trouble and all these like workarounds to get open. And when that started happening, I honestly couldn't believe they even made that choice because it feels so counterintuitive to every other game of this style that has ever been made. I cannot fathom why they would make a decision like that. That's like a choice. The budget didn't make them make that choice. That is a choice that they made for whatever reason. I can't tell you, but it really dampens the momentum of it too because it might have worked a little better if I didn't feel like I was getting stuck and having to go do something I'd already done. And the story here, you know, Jodie Comer's character, she has an uncle in this manor. It's kind of, it used to be a manor. It's kind of been retrofitted to be like like a mental hospital. And she got an uncle who's gone missing, but he's also gone missing in the house, which is weird. And then so she's hired David Harbour's character as a private eye to come investigate. And there's essentially two campaigns. You could play as her, and that's a whole campaign, about 5 hours, and you could play as David Harbour's character. That's about a whole campaign. It's about 5 hours. There are differences. there's dialogue cutscene differences. A lot of what you're doing is kind of the same in the actual gameplay, though, and because the gameplay's not all that great to begin with, it doesn't feel like you're not going to feel like you're going to want to go back in and play the other half of this when it's over. I just don't think at least most people are going to feel that way. Um, and it the story is it's very piecemeal. I feel like they leave a lot in um, these documents that you find laying around, and you can't read just. It's not even just that you like read these documents to yourself, but there's like some very corny, very over the top voice acting that like reads them all out loud to you, and so that also felt silly. Like just let me read it to myself. I like you're honestly making it harder to take this seriously with how kind of silly a lot of this comes across. Yeah. And then when by the time you start getting to like the resolutions and like kind of reveals of like, oh, this is why her uncle's really missing, and this is what's really going on with their family connection. It tries to have some emotional beats that I'm just like that. It just doesn't land because it's so wooden and just kind of delivered in this very weird way. And like some people might say, some of the Silent Hill games have this kind of very weird, off kilter kind of delivery in the voice acting, which I think in Silent Hill it's deliberate. It's kind of David Lynch. It's trying to throw you off and make it kind of dreamlike. And I get the feeling that they were looking at Silent Hill and they were kind of trying to copy that a little bit in this game and try and evoke a similar sense of almost kind of Lynchian style. But I think it's too wooden. It's too wooden to where like two characters could be standing there having a conversation, and I honestly don't even believe that they're talking to each other because the way that like they just there's no chemistry between any of the characters in this. Um, yeah, yeah. I at the end of the day, I think I would give it a skip it, honestly. Like maybe on a high skip it, if you are someone that it just loves the style of game so much, and if the aesthetic is enough to get you interested and kind of pull you in, and you want to maybe dive into it just for how the environments look and some of that exploration, you can get something out of some of that. That's the game's best quality in my opinion. But a lot of the rest of it just feels like there might have been potential in there, but it never feels realized in a very cohesive way.
Mm. Do you have a cutscene in particular that
Ugh, God,
just to show an example, a little bit of
there's a
some of the.
if you look up a scene with the Jeremy character who's supposed to be her uncle, he's consistently very over the top. Yeah, like maybe chapter 4 Jeremy or something like if you
I see
search
here
something like
exploring the
that.
graveyard and finding Jeremy. Edward Carnaby talks to Jeremy. Maybe this right here. Let's see. Let me know.
Let's see.
Let's see.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, dude, let's do that one. Yeah.
okay. Walking, sound like Hellboy with them steps. Damn, jeez.
You want to tell me what this is all about?
Welcome, Detective, to the great
Welcome to Ted.
show this Saturday.
Oh, what you say?
I was making fun of him, but welcome, detective. It's just it's the southern drawl is so exaggerated.
Of Mississippi. Now the hotel, the Black Pharaoh, the ancient magician who lived 1,000 lives and
He
all
sounds
the
like Lindsey
1,000
Graham, if I'm
ghosts.
being honest.
I can see why you settled on calling him the Dark Man. Saves your breath.
Damn,
So,
he sounds not interested in this at all, David Harbour.
No, then that goes for Jodie Comer too. Both David Harbour and Jodie Comer sound bored, and I think it's a lot of it's the direction too. Is like I don't think they're being given anything in that recording booth of like how should the character be, should there be an inflection here, what's the emotion of the moment. It just seems like there's none of that in their acting, And then again, that's like the best acting. And then like Jeremy's Lindsey Graham impression is like the worst acting.
You got scared by a stage magician, and now he's living inside your head.
You can mock me, detective. You would be the crazy one to think his presence can be ignored. Look where we are.
All right.
I have to do everything John McCain says.
All right. Yeah. I kind of interested to see because Jodie Comer's really great. I loved her in Last Duel. I really liked her in just 28 years later, and I like David Harbour. David Harbour's good. I think David Harbour can be really good.
I like both of them. And that's one of the things that I was looking forward to about the game is I thought, hey, maybe it's kind of janky and maybe it's a bit more like a double A game that's not super polished, but hey, they'll be fun at least, right? And honestly, they both sound pretty bored. She maybe has a few moments where she's like slightly more emotive than David Harbour, but I don't feel like it's by very much.
Are you so sad all the time? Nothing is the matter, nothing at all. There's nothing for me to be sad about, nothing to do, to love, to see, to be. I just feel. But that's all right.
And I think Jodie Comer's British, isn't she? She's British, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah. Seems like she does a good American accent. Yeah. Pretty decent. There. So okay. Okay, she's there. But all right. So you said skip it for you for Alone in the Dark. Huh?
Yeah, I mean, the third person like survival horror style is like one of my favorite kinds of games. So, I feel like if anybody was going to be like extra forgiving to this or, like let some, janky elements slide and find the bright spots, I feel like I'm the person that would kind of let some of that go and maybe give it higher than it deserves, even. Just because I like that style so much. But I feel like there's just that little to really grab onto here. Like I said, there's some good stuff with the environments. Some of the exploration is fun just because the way it looks is really cool. The environments are really great. But yeah, from the voice acting to the combat mechanics, the enemy design, the just lack of chemistry between characters, um, and honestly, some of the facial animation too, like so that doesn't help the voice acting. Is like the faces just are not moving very well. Which again, if the story was interesting, I could let that go. But I feel like there's very little that this does right, and it's too bad because Alone in the Dark it's like a legacy title, right? Like I said, it predates Resident Evil. It kind of invented that style that Resident Evil is kind of famous for inventing, is what most people would say. And so I thought the idea of doing this and trying to kind of reinvent it in the modern era based on what the like Resident Evil and Dead Space remakes and Alan Wake 2 and what all these games have done. And maybe someone will do it again someday, and then we'll get the next time they'll get it right. But this is definitely not it.
Okay. I was gonna say Alan Wake. Alone in the Dark. Um, got mixed reviews here. Failed to meet the sales expectation of THQ's Nordic's parent company, Embracer Group, there, which led to the closure of Pieces Interactive in June 2024. Hey, we're on the anniversary of its closure. Look at that.
Yeah.
You got that there, so it's pretty much a failure there. Yeah. So
And this was also too, right around the time Embracer as a company, as a publisher, was just falling apart, right? Having this close down tons of studios. So, they might have been able to do something more impressive if they had a chance to do a sequel, maybe, like learn from their mistakes, work on improving things. But, it's too bad, you don't want anybody to lose their job, but I can also see why the company was like, yeah, we got to get rid of, like, we have to get rid of some teams. Who made Alone in the Dark? Whoever that is, get rid of. I just, I don't think anybody's good. Anybody's like getting fired, but at the same time, I'm like, yeah, I might look towards them too if I was in charge over there.
mm, yeah. So I think you haven't had a negative review in a while there. I think you've been pretty mostly
I've been
positive.
pretty positive on most things recently. Yeah, this is one of the weakest things I've seen or played and engaged with in quite some time.
So let's skip it from Sage for Alone in the Dark. We got Alan Wake at home with Alone in the Dark. Yeah, all right.